Shemai Rhian, thank you so much for sitting down with me to have a chat about your poetry. My first question to you is, when did poetry begin? Do you remember your earliest poems?
Hi Taz, thanks for having me and sitting me on the most comfortable stool in the world. But it's really nice to be here. And when did poetry start for me? Um, I kind of grew up in a house with not many books, so I wasn't a big reader when I was a child, but I was always like writing. And I don't know whether that was because there was the lack of books, so I had to make my own kind of stories and poems, or whether I was simply bored because I've got three older siblings. They're much older than me. They like left home long before I was born. So I think being like an only child is kind of quite like a lonely thing. So I think a lot of that was writing poetry and things as you know as company or somewhere for my imagination to go. Um, so poetry's always been there, always written poems, and I think I can tell you why I kept on writing poems. I remember very vividly um, taking a poem that I'd written to school to show my teacher, and I just really remember vividly the praise that I got from it, and I loved that praise, and it was like a drug, and I wanted it again and again and again. So inevitably, I just kept on writing poems, wanting that praise, and I guess that's probably why I'm still doing it now, um, even though praise is harder to attain these days, if at all. But yeah, poetry's always been there. Um, I think I abandoned it for a while because my first book was a novel, but yeah, always written poetry. So this is the first poem from Girls Etc., which was published by Broken Sleep Books in March of this year. It's called September 30th, 2005. This is how it starts for us, the both of us screaming. Your little lungs giving out their very first roar, and me, on the other end of the cord, left smouldering in the embers of that temporary madness. And now, all these years later, that cord has been cut. You still have the lungs of a lion, and we are both still screaming.
As a novelist and a poet, I'm curious about your writing process. How do you know an idea is a poem or something else?
Yeah, you say that I'm a novelist and a poet, but the only novel I wrote was 10 years ago, so I feel like I've kind of divorced the novelist in me, and I don't think there's going to be any hope of reconciliation in the future. Um, so from my perspective now, I know an idea is going to be a poem because I'm choosing exclusively just to write poetry. So um, it starts off in words in notebooks, and then they're kind of just like puzzle pieces that I put together to form the poem, and then I guess I don't have a box to go off for the picture, so who knows how it's going to end up. But that's what I like about poetry. For me, it feels like there are no rules, and I like having no rules. Whereas with a novel, it's a big commitment, and like I said, this was 10 years ago now, and it's been interesting actually because recently I've had to revisit it because I was approached by a TV company um, who wanted to broach the idea of turn into a TV series. So that's been really interesting going over that and trying to condense this book into 8 episodes for TV, um, which was a really interesting process because I wrote this 10 years ago, and I think I was quite green because I'd never had anything published before this. And I think I kind of, over the years, have looked back on this book and kind of hated the ending. I wished I'd written it differently. So it was really cool with TV series, working with the company to be able to rewrite the ending, which was just really awesome for me. I've had like this regret in my head. This book is pretty much based on my childhood, growing up in the Rhondda Valley, and yeah, so and it's it's about all the different things that happened within school and just growing up in that sort of mining village post sort of Thatcher era. And yeah, so with the TV series, it was really cool to rewrite the ending. And I hope if it ever does get to TV that it'll, I think for most Welsh people, it's kind of really annoying when you see portrayals of Welsh people on TV, because we're always kind of like the butt of the joke and everything. So I really hope that this might be able to tell a more authentic story about Welsh Valley's life, and the people I think often were painted in a very different colour to what actually goes on, and maybe just the paintbrush is in the wrong hands, I don't know. But yeah, so I don't see myself as a novelist. I'm a poet, and who knows, maybe one day I will go back to writing novels, but for the time being I feel like I found where I belong writing poetry, and I'm much more comfortable in that space. But who knows what will happen in the future. So it's a lot of effort writing a novel, so and I'm quite lazy, so yeah.
Please tell me about your most recent book.
So this is Girls Etc., published by Broken Sleep. It's a poetry collection, and it's very small book, but it took me like 7 years to write it. No, that's not actually true. It took me 7 years to, I guess, for want of a better word, sort of be brave enough to put it out there in the world. So it's basically a collection about motherhood in parts, and also about queer relationships that I've had, hence the title Girls Etc. So yeah, it's just a book about that, about relationships, and it's quite heavy with themes of domestic abuse in gay relationships. Hence why it took so long for me to put it out there. So I think it's a subject that doesn't get talked about enough. So I was a bit nervous about putting it out there, but I try to mix it up with humour and stuff. But I think I did. It was interesting. I recently got asked to speak to some PhD students about the book. They wanted to talk about the fact that it was written about taboo subjects, and that really kind of annoyed me. Not the students themselves or anything, but just the fact that it's considered taboo. And I think that's where the problem is. I think especially for women, by putting the label of taboo on subjects like, I don't know, like sex and abuse and things. I think that's just designed to add to the silence and the shame. And I think I feel quite bad now that I spent so long worrying about putting that out there, because again, I think it's just the narrative that we should not talk about these things is just enforced by saying it's like a taboo subject. So yeah, I've had some really good feedback from people in queer relationships that have said, thanks for writing this, because we feel the same and this has happened to us. So I think that's been really encouraging for me. I feel like it's been worthwhile writing it and going through that process of, trauma or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, there's some poems in there about Taylor Swift as well, because my daughter is a massive Swiftie. So yeah, it's a poetry collection about girls and sex and love and it going wrong, and then coming out the other end. So yeah.
I wanted to ask if there has been an element of catharsis having written this, or that's not the reason why you wrote it. It was that you wanted to address these issues, but without kind of providing any personal reason for writing about these topics.
I think that's just what I do. I purge. That's what my writing is all about. And all of my books have been me, and I maybe a self-indulgent or narcissistic, but that's what I do. I write about things that have gone on. I mean, as I was saying, the novel is about my childhood and growing up, and even though it's fictionalized, and the book before this was The Last Polar Bear on Earth, which was about me having MS and being diagnosed with that. And yeah, definitely catharsis, you know. I guess the bonus is helping people and feeling connected to other people, and but yeah, massive catharsis. But I guess the nervousness was just around, again, just the shame that these topics and these experiences bring up anyway. But yeah, I'm glad I wrote it now, and again, it just feels like purging. Yeah.
In terms of this writing what you know, which is what I get the impression that you are, you're one of the best writers in Wales who have worked out a technique to talk about the self, which is quite a difficult way of approaching writing anyway. Do you have any tips for any aspiring poets or writers about how they can write about the self, particularly approaching difficult subjects?
Yeah, I think this came up again in the PhD conversations we were having about the nervousness people have about putting themselves out there and being so exposed and so vulnerable. And, you know, I use the third person quite a lot in my poetry, and so I can sort of step back a bit from it. Everyone's different. It's whatever works for you. I feel just, and my advice to the PhD group who were like worried about, you know, writing about things that are traumatic, and you know, I just said, like, be honest. I think the reader can always tell when you're not being honest. But I find it easy to write about myself. I don't know why. I guess I know myself very well. So, and as we said, it's like a form of catharsis. But I guess just be honest and don't be afraid of your voice. It's your voice, you know. Yeah, I think that's it. Like I said, I do step back from myself sometimes and use the you. I feel that sometimes gives me a bit more control over what I'm trying to say. But yeah, just do it and just be honest. And like I said, I was very worried about what people would think about this book and things. But I think you'll be surprised how many people will listen to what you've said and read what you've read, and you'll find solidarity with other people, other readers. Yeah, just be honest and be yourself. The daughters of Eden. Think of that garden, the rivers, the flowers and the trees, how God mixed it on his palette, the very first shade of the colour green, and then, like Monet, slung it from his paintbrush at the earth's blank canvas. Paradise. Not one pristine blade of grass yet trampled by the careless foot of man. We know what happened next. But what if God didn't create Adam? What if, instead, he first made Eve and then plucked from her rib another Eve? No Cain and Abel to follow, because he knew it, even then, that women make terrible mothers. Would either Eve have snatched the forbidden apple from the tree, given in to temptation? I would have been too preoccupied with her nakedness to even notice the serpent.
You've already referenced Taylor Swift and writing about trauma and abuse. There is also dark humour clamoured in subtle pathos in a lot of your writing, and the cute references to popular culture. I want to know about, or I want to know more about each of these elements, if you'd like to share.
I think I'm a very serious person, but I'm also a very silly person, a very, very silly person. So when I'm writing poetry and I'm writing about serious, like heavy things, I feel like I have to balance it with humour. I think it's easier to digest the serious stuff when you've got some humour in there. I don't know whether it's just me. It's easier for me to digest personally, but I kind of feel like it's, you know, when you're hiding vegetables in kids' food, you know, it feels like that. You're getting you want the serious message to get out there, but you're kind of packaging it in something nice as well. Or maybe I think I'm just perpetually a class clown. It's just my thing to go to humour naturally. But yeah, I can be very, very silly. So But yeah, I'd like to have a balance of dark and light in my poems if I can. As for the pop culture, like I said, I've got a teenage daughter, so I've been exposed to Taylor Swift and other things I'd rather not be exposed to. But I just write about what's in my surroundings and what's in my eyes and my ears and my brain. So if there's pop culture references, that's why I'm not conscious of doing it. It's just what I'm exposed to at the time. So did you have anything specifically you were thinking of, or was it just Taylor Swift?
No. I think Taylor Swift is a huge part of I would say the descriptions of your books when it comes to reading, and I think that you talk about it much more than there is actually Taylor Swift within the poetry. So I wonder if it's something that you enjoy thinking about.
Do I enjoy thinking about Taylor Swift?
Well, not specifically Taylor Swift, but what would be pop music, popular culture.
As I said, Taylor Swift is just, my daughter's left for university now, but Taylor Swift is just constantly on in my house, playing 24/7. So I think she just provides the balance for me, because as I said, this is a really serious collection about serious things, and having Taylor Swift in there provided me that balance and that lightness, that escape from the seriousness of the poems. And I just automatically go to that. I need some lightness, I need some humour in there. And yeah, Taylor Swift was that. So I'm going to read a poem that I read quite often at events. People seem to like it, and because the subject is very popular at the moment. It's called Taylor fucking Swift. Thanks to my teenage daughter, if you dare me to sing you every single song Taylor Swift has ever written, I could easily do it. Lyric perfect too. In our house, Taylor's name is sacred. Her face repeated on our walls like the image of our blessed Lady Mary, and I feel I ought to make the sign of the cross each time I pass it, even though I'm not a practicing Catholic. I once asked my daughter who she would save if we were both drowning, me or Taylor. She could only choose one of us. And I knew by the awkward silence that followed that it would be me left sinking, mouth open in a silent scream, while Taylor is pulled from the water. Caramel hair falling in perfect wet curls like an all-American mermaid, ready to write her next song about heartbreak.
Please tell me about your experience of the Hay Festival Writers at Work.
The Hay Festival Writers at Work. Life-changing, which is a really cliche thing to say, I know, but it was. I think, did we meet is that how we met? Like, I think at the Hay Festival at some point. So it was obviously really life-changing for you as well, Taz, meeting me.
I think I knew you, but I guess that we kind of connected over this year's stint of going back in there as sort of being, alumnus of the scheme.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, it's basically that they pick a bunch of Welsh writers and throw you into the Hay Festival for 2 weeks, and you get the chance to meet agents and people in the industry, and you get to hang out with famous writers and celebrities and things. But for me, the reason it was life-changing was because of the people I met. I went there in 2016 and was lucky enough to go for 3 years. I think you only did one by that point because they'd stopped doing it for so long. But literally just made friends for life. For instance, one of the writers on there that I met, I'm now godmother to her 2 children. Don't know why she chose me to be godmother, because I'm, probably the worst role model in the world. But just meeting these people who are now my best friends, and just to have that support network of other writers, whether that's just to bounce ideas around, to have discussions about your work and things. But yeah, it was really life-changing. And as I went there with my novel, that was the first thing I'd written, and then we had a workshop with Gillian Clark, and it was a poetry workshop, and from there I was like, wow, yeah, I'd forgotten that I liked writing poetry, and I've had 2 books published since then, and it's opened lots of doors for me and things. So yeah, forever grateful to the Hay Festival. And as you said, we were able to go back last year. They had us back reading, which was really, really nice. So yeah, I love the Hay Festival. And if they do Writers at Work this year, I recommend applying to it if they put a call out. Yeah, it was just brilliant. I always ordered the lobster. All date night achieved was reaffirming the fact that we were no longer the same people. The red Tiffany lamp hanging over the darkened booth still pushed crimson triangles of light across the tablecloth. You wore the black dress you thought was my favourite. And when he came to take our order, the owner of the restaurant said he was glad to see us again, his favourite customers. Why had we not come back to see him for so long? We made our excuses, reinvented the story of our lives, and you hesitated about your selection. But I knew exactly what I wanted. I was always so predictable, and you said that was the problem. Stomach rumbling, my heart sank when I saw it. The marker penned through the belly of the words. They'd taken the lobster off the menu.
Who are the contemporary writers you admire the most?
Okay, so a small list because it's quite early and I've only had a protein bar. So there's Sharon Olds, who I love, Joseph Fasano, Bobby Parker, and Kim Adodzino. I don't know how to pronounce her surname. But there's, yeah, a whole list of people that I can't remember. And my favourite poet of all time is Linda Pastan. I think she passed away last year. And Frank O'Hara, I love. I just like poetry that makes me feel something, that when I read it, I think, fuck yeah, that's exactly how that feels. And those writers I mentioned do that for me. Yeah, there's a whole list of writers that I can't think of right now. But definitely like Bobby Parker and Andrew Macmillan, and there's so many to choose from. But yeah, and Linda Pastan is my favourite. I think even in the front of this novel, she let me use one of her poems, which was really amazing. To the girl who said, I'll never be happy because I'm too picky. You preferred orange juice to apple. This I discovered the morning after the night I had to sleep in the spare room because your breathing reminded me of my grandmother's old-fashioned kettle whistling in the kitchen whenever she made herself a cup of tea. After that, just to prove my unfastidiousness, I took to bringing my own carton of apple juice round for breakfast, and even tried looking past the fact you never laughed at my leave the gun, take the cannoli joke when I handed you the bag of pastries in the Italian bakery. Who the fuck hasn't seen The Godfather? And who the fuck doesn't know every single word to Barbra Streisand's The Way We Were? I put up with a lot. Oh, and for the record, I'd never dated someone shorter than me before I met you, but I never looked down on you, not even for that.
Are you working on anything at present?
Yes, busy. So I've got another collection of poetry coming out with Broken Sleep in May, so I've been editing that. I'll tell you, the title is Maybe I'll Call Gillian Anderson, and I'll explain that. We mentioned about me being very silly earlier, so it's a very silly title for a very serious poem. So my daughter's left for university, so I've been kind of thinking about that and thinking about who I am now that she's gone and things. So from thinking about all that, I was drawn to thinking about myself at her age and maybe younger, my teenage years, and thinking about all the crazy stuff I did and things. So a lot of poetry came from that. And yeah, so the title is Maybe I'll Call Gillian Anderson, and it's basically about this room I've got now, this empty room in my house where my daughter was, and my friends are telling me, you need to keep busy, you need to, find new things to do, and besides, sitting in this empty room weeping, wishing time was rolled back. So the title is just kind of I needed a beautiful woman, who doesn't, just to have someone in the title that was completely silly and ridiculous. And I think at the end of the poem I say, maybe I'll call Gillian Anderson and invite her over to sleep in this spare room, which is of course completely ridiculous, and yeah, just part of the silliness and the humour that I try to bring into poetry. I think Gillian Anderson, because we argue about a lot of things in the world, Donald Trump, climate change, politics, but I think it's universally agreed upon that Gillian Anderson is very hot, so it seemed like she seemed like a good person to have in the silly title. It was between her and Julia Roberts, but Gillian just had the edge. I'm sure Julia will be devastated when she sees this, but yeah, so it's a collection about my daughter leaving home. It's a collection about me revisiting my past, revisiting who I was when I was that age and who I am now. So yeah, very serious and very silly as usual. Yeah.
Great. Diolch yn fawr, Rhian. It's been such a pleasure talking to you and finding out about your poetry and writing.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Taz. It's been lovely.